Hi everyone, I'm Kevin. I'm a rising second-year PhD student at the University of Washington. And today I'm very excited to be presenting some work on COVID-19 misinformation encounters in private WhatsApp chats from the perspective of university students in the US. And this was work that I completed while I was an undergrad at Princeton with some fantastic collaborators here from the University of Chicago. Okay, I want to start off by making the following claim, which is that misinformation on WhatsApp is a unique socio-technical challenge. Because not only do we have the technical challenges associated with moderating content in end-to-end encrypted environments, but we also have social challenges arising from particular group chat dynamics due to how the platform is often used here in the US. And I make that claim because we studied how university students in the US responded to COVID-related misinformation in private WhatsApp chats between family and friends. And through our findings, I will further illustrate this claim for you. But just to step back and motivate our work a little bit, I'm sure at this point we're all too familiar with this term. But early on in the pandemic, the World Health Organization actually declared COVID-19 to be an infodemic in addition to a pandemic. So what did they mean by this? And so the WHO defines infodemic as an overabundance of information, including deliberate attempts to disseminate wrong information. And this can be in both online and offline settings. But if we consider the online case specifically, we quickly realized that the barrier to publishing content on social media has gotten so low that false information can spread much faster than something like the virus itself. And this is especially true if a platform is designed for the quick distribution of information, such as WhatsApp. And I know many of you in this room may use Twitter and see that as a hub where information gets distributed around very quickly. But what you may be surprised to find is that a similar percentage of Americans actually say they use WhatsApp compared to Twitter, at least in this 2021 study distributed by the Pew Research Center. That said, the usage scenarios for the two apps can be quite different. And so it turns out that many immigrants in the US actually use WhatsApp to communicate with family and friends back home, as well as to connect with their immigrant communities here within the US. And one big selling point for the app, besides it being very global, is its commitment to security. So all messages on the platform are guaranteed to be end-to-end encrypted. And this actually has some pretty interesting implications on how the platform can moderate content. And that's actually one of the reasons why we're so interested in WhatsApp in particular. And so understandably, misinformation in WhatsApp is a tricky problem, and it has attracted a lot of attention from the research community so far. But previous work in the space typically focuses on these large public groups where data is more accessible. So with these public groups, anyone can join with an invitation link. So researchers can simply go into these chats and with permission, download the messages and analyze them that way. But from what we know about how users actually use the platform, at least here in the US, WhatsApp may be used in these much more intimate settings with family and friends. And misinformation encounters in these smaller private chats that are not open to the public may be quite different than those same encounters in these larger public groups. So that brings us to the fundamental question behind our study here, which is, what can we learn from qualitative explorations of misinformation in private WhatsApp chats during the COVID-19 pandemic? And here's what we did to answer that. First of all, we acknowledge that different misinformation experiences can come from different user demographics, so we decided to focus on one demographic in particular. We focused on WhatsApp users in the US because the US actually has the third largest user base of WhatsApp in the world. It's around 70 million users, I believe. And also the US is home to diverse groups of immigrant communities. And we decided to focus on younger users out of some previous work that showed this unreciprocated concern that younger generations directed towards older family members, especially in the context of COVID-19 misinformation. So what we did was we conducted 16 semi-structured virtual interviews with university students in the US who also happen to be regular WhatsApp users. And I'll note that even though our participants are based in the US, they still communicated with both people within the US and outside of the US, and many of our participants came from immigrant communities. And our conversations revolved around 3 topic categories. Their general WhatsApp usage, their experiences encountering misinformation on the platform, as well as any fact-checking strategies they employed, as well as any higher-level design recommendations that they had for the platform. And we have a full list of findings that you can check out in our paper, but I'll just highlight 3 of them here. The first is that misinformation in private family and friends group chats is often spread from good intentions. And to set this up, one of the first things we noticed while talking to participants was how easy it was to forward many messages to people, to many groups and people at once using WhatsApp's forwarding feature, and almost too easy, in the words of this participant. And oftentimes, this forwarded content was actually meant to be useful. So this participant here got the advice that they should rinse their nose with a saline solution to prevent COVID. And even though this advice might be completely useless in practice, it's spread out of genuine concern. And something else that we noticed was the difference in mindsets between misinformation senders and receivers. So this participant here, when they were talking about their mother, it was revealed that their mother believed that the family should do whatever they can to mitigate COVID, even if that means spreading information that's not necessarily true. But also the mother didn't consider it as misinformation, interestingly, possibly due to the benevolent intent behind it. And so related to the first point here, the intimacy that often comes with this misinformation greatly complicates users' willingness and ability to deal with it. And this is perhaps best summarized by a quote from this participant here, who feels like the level of genuineness added to the misinformation makes it difficult to deal with and even causes people to panic. And here we see a real dissonance because users tend to trust those who are close to them, such as older relatives, and that's why they are in these friends and family group chats in the first place. But these are also the same people who they receive misinformation from. And something else that complicates this is a cultural belief commonly mentioned by our participants from immigrant communities, which is that correcting older relatives is often seen as disrespectful. But older relatives are also the ones who typically send misinformation, at least according to our participants. And this participant here attributed that to the lack of technological literacy. And as a result, the misinformation sent in these groups is typically ignored rather than disputed. And in the rare case that active disputes did happen, it was typically between those of a similar age range. So for example, participants would talk about it with their siblings or with family members who the participant was very comfortable having open conversations with, such as parents. And so now that we know what kinds of misinformation users encounter, what do participants think can be done about all this? And the answer is actually not that much, because many users see this fundamental trade-off between the privacy commitments of the platform and its ability to perform this stringent content moderation. And we found that strict content moderation can actually be seen as infringing upon personal privacy on the platform, and that many participants actually preferred it if WhatsApp did not explicitly flag or censor content. And when the platform did, however, participants mentioned that it's very important for WhatsApp to have privacy-focused messaging that should be made very clear upfront. An example of this would be something like disclosing the privacy-preserving technique that's used to flag messages. And otherwise, participants suggested that WhatsApp can just collect already known examples of misinformation or already known sources of misinformation and just send it to users as a list for reference. And overall, this trade-off actually echoes some interesting discussions in the legal space about end-to-end encryption and user protection. So in this 2019 letter to Facebook from government officials in the UK, US, and Australia, it's actually requested that Facebook does not implement end-to-end encryption across all of its messaging services because that would sacrifice user safety. And now, with this study, we know that this perceived trade-off is not only seen by legal experts and technical experts, but also everyday WhatsApp users as well. Okay, so given these findings, what can WhatsApp and other end-to-end encrypted messaging services do going forward? We have a full series of design recommendations that I'll invite you to check out in our paper, but I'll just outline a couple broad directions here. The first is, so if you recall, it can be challenging for users to correct others due to the social relationships that they have with others in their group. So one direction to consider is how we can help users deal with misinformation in ways that mitigate these social power dynamics. And this can be in the form of letting users anonymously apply a fact-checking icon to certain links or messages that they see and offering that fact-checking service for everyone else in the group to use. And interestingly, WhatsApp actually has its own fact-checking icon that they piloted a couple of years ago with a very small, limited number of users. And essentially, this was a little magnifying glass that appeared next to messages, and you can tap it, and WhatsApp would perform a web search on this link. And just to clarify, because WhatsApp isn't actually able to inspect these links to decide where this icon should be applied to, it was applied, I believe, across all messages with links. But if we put this ability to selectively attach these icons to links in the hands of users, then we can offer relevant fact-checking services without explicitly accusing anyone of sending misinformation. And before moving on, I'll just note that a limitation of this, of course, is in very small groups when anonymity starts breaking down, and more user research would be necessary to look at how this can actually work in practice. And you may also recall that users are worried about the platform sacrificing encryption to correct misinformation. So another direction we can consider here is how we can empower the user to better fact-check or flag misinformation for themselves. And this can be in the form of adding friction when sharing unopened links. And this is actually tested by some platforms already, including this mock-up you can see from Facebook. But this has not yet been implemented in WhatsApp, and we think that implementing something like this is especially valuable on a platform like WhatsApp, where a lot of information is spread through link forwarding. And of course, there's also the question of how WhatsApp can reliably detect whether a link has been opened in a privacy-preserving way. And beyond that, how to show that to the user without eroding user trust in the platform's privacy. So that's a couple things to carefully consider going forward. OK, just to wrap up here, I claimed at the beginning that misinformation in WhatsApp is a unique socio-technical challenge. So now let's review why. First of all, the nature of misinformation in these private WhatsApp groups can look quite different than what we may see in more open social media platforms such as Facebook and Twitter. For example, we did not observe any instances of disinformation where false information was intentionally spread to cause harm. And you can also see how social relationships within these smaller private group chats, as well as privacy commitments made by the broader platform, brings about challenges to misinformation management. And in the midst of this, user empowerment and mitigating social power dynamics can be potential ways forward when designing to combat misinformation in WhatsApp and end-to-end encrypted messaging platforms more broadly. And I'll leave you with that, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.